I was recently in the States, United States, for a couple of weeks, and I found myself doing something totally ridiculous. And it was based on a stereotype I had and assumptions I had in my head on what an Australian does or what Americans think Australians do. So if I greet you, I usually say hello. But somehow over there I was saying g'day. G'day, mate, I even said once. And I just wondered why I was doing that. But this sort of is my intro into, I think we make two assumptions when it comes to low-income households. And so I want to walk you through that. GEER, the group of energy efficiency researchers, completed a project recently before you. And the GEER group actually formed out of the National Low Income Energy Efficiency Project. And since then, we've voluntarily chosen to stay together and keep working in this space because we see that there's a lot of work yet to be done. So I'm going to give you a very, very quick overview of the LIEEP reports, and I hope that you read the fuller report because I'm going to go really fast right now. So LIEEP was basically run, 20 projects were run in these areas in Australia, and it reached 32 or so thousand homes. So it was a very large project. Around 13 initiatives were trialled, and with different combinations of those initiatives, there were 44 initiatives trialled. So it was a massive pilot, and we're really, really glad the Commonwealth funded this project. There were 9 cohorts that were targeted, and they're up there, including tenants, the elderly, Indigenous people, culturally and linguistically diverse, and so on. And they're the sorts of initiatives trialled, and I'll talk to you about the orange and the blue in the next slide. So the first result overall of LIEEP, and this was conducted based on the 20 reports that were submitted by each project, we can see the first lot, which we call, I can't even read what we called it, high touch and high tech. We can see that there was an energy reduction across the board, and that they range depending on the initiative that was trialled. But next of all, maybe to explain why that energy reduction occurred, we looked at the behaviours, and most projects measured some before and after indicator of the behaviours. And we can see that the increase in energy efficiency behaviours was very high. Now just go back again. The reduction in energy ranged on average from 2 to 12%. The increase in behaviours ranged from around 30 to 80% on average. So in other words, people are doing a lot of different things in the home after they'd experienced one of our initiatives, and it had a low but significant impact on their energy use and their energy bills. And the question is, why is that? It highlights, and I'm a social marketer, so I'm all about behaviour change, but it really highlights that we can't just rely on consumers changing their behaviours to adequately address their energy bill problem. And so low-income households, despite all their efforts, can only have a small impact on their bill. And I think we need to not forget that. My colleague Rebecca will talk about the impact of their project, gamification together with digital technology, and you can see that that impact of, is the first orange bar, so it had quite an impact on behaviour change. I also note, though, that 7 out of the 10 projects trialled some sort of home energy visit with a combination of minor or major retrofits in home displays and so on. And so that's probably the predominance of the results is represented there. So the first assumption that we make is that if people change what they do in the home, their energy use and bills will reduce. And in fact, if they don't and they've got really high bills, maybe they're just, guzzling their energy. What we found in LIEEP, though, and perhaps why some of the energy use reductions are low, is that a lot of people were already using really low levels of energy as they could manage it in the home. And we were sort of, couldn't go in and say, by the way, drop it further. For example, some households were going without food in order to pay an energy bill. Many households were incredibly hot or incredibly cold because they felt that they couldn't turn on the power to change their home comfort level. And so I think this gives us a lot of food for thought. It's not just about lowering bills. Surely we care about the quality of life. One of the classic examples from LIEEP was one household in Tasmania where the indoor temperature was measured over 3 months during winter, and the average temperature was between 8 to 10 degrees inside the home. And the occupant was a single elderly man. And one day their temperature went up to 19 degrees. And so the researchers went back and had a yarn with that man to discover that that's the day he had a visitor and he didn't want them to feel uncomfortable. So I don't know about you, but I'm not okay that anyone in Australia feels that they have to live in that kind of cold. So I was asked to talk about the motivators and barriers, and we've got an absolute problem because I can't see what I wrote. So there they are. So if I duck down there, there's no microphone. Anyway, but please, we do discuss them in the report. There are a range of things that will motivate and incentivise consumers in the home to change what they do, and there's a range of issues that they face. So I'm sorry about that. I might have had a slight change in what I wanted to say since I started attending this forum. Thank you. So the next project we worked on was around the co-benefits. So these are the things experienced beyond energy use and energy behaviours in the home. And I'll just go straight to there. There were a range of co-benefits that were measured, and you can see across the board that LIEEP was able to improve those co-benefits for households. So it looks like a small improvement, but what was really surprising is that, except for stress, they weren't all really high already. And this leads me to the next assumption that we make, that people in Australia, their home is their sanctuary and people can be comfortable in their home. Well, just isn't the case for many low-income households. They're not safe, they don't feel in control, they feel out of control, they're stressed, and some of the anecdotal stories are indicating that they're turning to substance abuse, violence and so on as a part of their coping mechanism. So I think the problem is really, really serious. I've got 1 minute to tell you about some recommendations. So beautiful pictures, have a look at them in detail when you can read them. I can't. So I think to understand, as my previous speakers have said, that tenants are in a very vulnerable position and they don't necessarily have the capacity or the capability to change their circumstance. If people own their own home and they're on a low income, they probably don't have much either. They can't afford to upgrade their home and put new insulation in and so on. So what we'd like to see is that there's a more proactive effort by retailers to get people who are entitled to concession on concession, and they're not waiting for the phone call. If someone's in hardship and they don't know what their rights are, then they sit there paying these extraordinarily high bills. The housing stock is a massive issue, as already raised before, and it really starts with public housing. So I'm here to put pressure on governments to why don't you get your housing right? And instead of being the worst housing that people can live in, that it's at least the most energy efficient. And I also concur with previous comments that we need to introduce minimum standards for rental properties, and there's a whole lot of really creative and inventive ways we can do that. My last comment to you on my wind-up is, and this is about the consumer voice and engagement. Keeping the sector complex will keep the consumer voice silent. Thank you.